What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. So as a YouTuber, I oftentimes get questions about what superheroes are capable of. And oftentimes these questions are pretty basic, but one thing to also keep in mind here is that for the most part, new people are getting into comic books all the time. And so what I might do is turn this into like a series where I answer questions that people have, give them straightforward answers with some explanation to it so that people understand why things are the way they are. Recently, I've been focusing a lot on stories just because I love doing stories. And for the most part, I've explained all the characters that I really find to be interesting or fascinating. But for the most part, I think that, for this, while this question may seem a little basic, for those of you guys who have been reading comics for a long time, just keep in mind, a lot of people are coming to this stuff for the very first time. So user Aya A asked the question, is Superman a speedster? The answer to this question is no. Superman is not a speedster. On the whole, in DC Comics, there's a difference between a person who can move super fast and a speedster. It's basically just a way to differentiate and to kind of create a category of sorts. Speedsters are basically members of the Flash family. So the classic Wally West Flash, the New 52 Flash, Barry Allen the Flash, Max Mercury, Jay Garrick. Jay Garrick's kind of a weird situation. Originally, he got his powers by virtue of just exposure to some chemical. I don't remember what it is that it's called, but the result was that it allowed him to move extremely fast. The problem with this was that he was like the outlier. Everybody else tapped into the Speed Force except for Jay Garrick. Eventually he was rolled in and his connection to the Speed Force was established in order to officially make him part of the Flash family. But for the most part, speedsters are only people who can tap into the Speed Force. Well, that raises the question, what is the Speed Force? Well, originally the Speed Force was a concept that was basically presented as part of Mark Waid's run on the Flash. Prior to this, the Speed Force was just something that was essentially non-existent. The only thing that we really had when it came to the Flash was that he could just run really, really fast. That's the way it always was. When it was, back in the 1930s and 40s, Jay Garrick had been exposed to a chemical. This resulted in him being able to run super fast. Fast forward to the 1950s and 1956, when Barry Allen was thrown onto the scene. Well, he was electrified, he was hit with lightning and doused with chemicals, so he could run really, really fast. And that was it. That was the only real explanation he got. The stories revolved around the question, how fast could he run? And that's when we got things like Barry Allen and, Eobard Thawne and these various characters being able to run back and forth through time. They could just run so fast, they could move through time itself. They could vibrate so fast, they could move to other dimensions. That's really all it revolved around. Now, when Crisis on Infinite Earths happened and Mark Waid took over the Flash title and basically began writing the stories of the classic Wally West, the Speed Force was introduced as a way to explain why it is that speedsters can run so fast. The question users always had as time began to progress, people started asking the question, well, it doesn't make any sense that, Barry would just be splashed with chemicals, struck by lightning, and suddenly be able to run through time. People wanted a little more meat and potatoes to their explanation on why heroes could do the things they did. And so Mark Waid basically said, well, there's this extra dimensional source of energy out there. And this extra dimensional source of energy is what speedsters use in order to access their super fast speed. And so what had basically been established here is that Barry Allen had been struck by lightning, doused in chemicals, and instead of that just giving him the ability to run super fast, instead he was able to tap into the Speed Force. Now later on, writer Jeff Johns would actually come back and change that and say, no, it was actually Barry Allen creating the Speed Force as he ran. And the result is that while Barry Allen created the Speed Force, he basically created the source of his own power. In the future, the Speed Force would grow massive enough that anybody across the multiverse could become a Flash. And growing large enough, it began to permeate all throughout space and time. And so Barry Allen, the Flash, had simultaneously created the Speed Force while tapping into a future version of the Speed Force. It's kind of a weird scenario, but this is the explanation that was used to basically say, during Crisis on Infinite Earths, instead of Barry Allen dying at the hands of the Anti-Monitor, Barry Allen merged with the Speed Force. That explanation came with Final Crisis, when Barry Allen emerged from the Speed Force after outrunning death. Now, of course, the other half of this question is really the age-old debate. Who's faster, the Flash or Superman? I mean, honestly, this question's kind of been beat to death, and I guess we could offer some kind of an explanation on it. Historically speaking, they've raced time and time again. Keep in mind, Superman was like DC's golden child, right? No matter what DC did, at the end of the day, Superman always had to maintain the top tier of their characters. But fans who were reading The Flash also came to realize that The Flash was extremely fast. You can't have The Flash titled as the fastest man alive and Superman be faster than The Flash. that doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. And so what DC did is they started creating these stories where the Superman and the Flash would race against one another. Now, the first of these came with Superman number 199 in 1967. And then after this, it just turned into this great big huge thing. So you had the Flash number 175 in 1967. You had World's Finest 198 through 199 in 1970. You had DC Comics Presents numbers 1 and 2 in 1978. The Flash Rebirth number 3 in 2009. Adventures of Superman number 463 in 1990. Action Comics number 314 in 1964. I mean, you had all these different stories that depicted these characters racing off against one another. But on the whole, it was usually always Superman breaking even. It was usually always Superman tying the Flash. It really wasn't until after we got into the post-Silver Age, which is basically everything after 1985, that it turned into this whole situation of the Flash just being faster than Superman. And back in the 1950s, Superman could do everything. There was actually a story where Superman, I don't remember what issue this story was, but there was a story where Superman basically outran infinity, whatever that means. I mean, he just ran to the point of infinity. It doesn't make any sense. Infinity is mathematical value meant to indicate impossibility of something ending, that it basically goes on forever. I don't know how you manage to outrun something going on forever. That doesn't make any sense. But, nonetheless, these are the explanations that were given in terms of how fast Superman was. When it got into the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths era, suddenly it was the Flash being able to be faster than Superman. Now, a lot of this was because of the fact that with classic Wally West, DC was writing stories where they were depicting classic Wally West as struggling with the mantle of the Flash, that Barry Allen held. And so the goal was to basically beef up classic Wally West, make him his own character, and in some ways, make him more powerful than the Flash Barry Allen. There was a story where he outran the universe. Of course, Barry himself basically outran death while he was in the Speed Force. But on the whole, Superman's speed is usually held to like a finite standard, right? Like Flash Volume 2 says that Superman's able to run at like 2,000 miles per second, or able to fly at 2,000 miles per second, or something along those lines. It's like 7.2 million miles per hour, I think it is. That's usually what people cite. That's usually what the stories say. They give an absolute definitive standard in terms of how fast Superman can fly. And so what it does is it gives fans the best of both worlds. Superman, when he's flying, is incredibly fast, second probably only to anybody in the Flash family, and even faster than some of those guys like Max Mercury or something along those lines. But it also allows the top two Flashes, which is to say classic Wally West and Barry Allen, to remain as the fastest men alive. So hopefully that answers your question. It's probably a little more information than you needed, but yeah, I mean, Superman's not a speedster at all. A speedster is defined as a person who can tap into the Speed Force. In terms of Superman versus the Flash, the Superman's basically tied with the Flash a multitude of times. As far as I'm aware, he's never beat the Flash in races more times than the Flash has beat him. So the other half is that the Speed Force is basically just this extra dimensional source of energy that exists out there that allows, speedsters to gain their powers, kind of like their own afterlife. When speedsters die, that's where they'll go. They'll go to the Speed Force. So anyway, if you guys enjoy this sort of thing, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think. Hopefully it helps you guys out, answers some questions that you guys might have out there. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and bring this video to an end, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.